You know, sometimes the most powerful stories are hiding in the most ordinary things. Today, we're going to do more than just look at a fascinating piece of history. We're going to break down how to tell it. We'll take the story of a simple mineral, salt, and a brand new technology, and show you how to turn that into a really compelling narrative that explains, well, how our modern world even works. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to walk through a 5-part structure that you can literally use for any kind of historical story. We'll start with crafting that perfect hook, build out the narrative, weave in the evidence, reflect on why it matters, and finish with a powerful final frame.
All right, first up, crafting the perfect hook. The whole goal here is to find a detail that's so surprising, so strange, that your audience just has to know the story behind it.
So we start with something really haunting, like this detail about the French salt tax, which was called the gabelle. Now, this wasn't just a tax on something you might choose to buy. No, this was the government forcing every person over the age of 8 to buy a certain amount of heavily taxed salt every year. Just think about that for a second. You're being legally required to buy a product you need to live at a wildly inflated price, all so the state can pay for its wars. It's pretty incredible.
And see, that's the technique right there. A fact like that, it doesn't just sit there. It immediately sparks all these questions in your mind. Like, why salt, of all things? What made it so important that an entire government could basically run its finances on it? And you have to wonder, how on earth did a system like that even survive? That sense of mystery, that's what makes your audience stick around. They need the answers.
Okay, on to part 2, building the narrative bridge. This is where you take that fascinating little detail from your hook and connect it to a much bigger story. You're basically laying out your core idea, your thesis, what we'll call the butterfly effect, that ties two seemingly separate things together.
So for us, the thesis is a total classic butterfly effect. It goes like this. The invention of mechanical refrigeration, that's our variable B, a piece of technology that you'd think has absolutely nothing to do with taxes or empires, right? Well, that invention directly led to the collapse of salt's incredible millennia-long power over the globe. That's our variable E.
And a great way to show this is to put these two eras side by side. On one hand, you have the age of salt. I mean, for thousands of years, salt was literally called white gold. It was the bedrock of entire economies, armies, trade routes. It's even where we get our word salary, because Roman soldiers were paid in it. And then, bam! Suddenly this new technology based on coal just comes along and completely dismantles that entire world order.
This timeline just illustrates the scale of this thing so perfectly. I mean, just look at it. We're talking about a commodity that shaped human civilization for millennia, all the way from ancient Mesopotamia right up to Gandhi's famous protest against the British Empire. And then you see it right there in the late 1800s. A single piece of tech, the refrigerated rail car, shows up and starts to pull the whole thing apart.
Okay, part 3, weaving in the evidence. This is really the heart of the argument. This is where you back up your big idea by layering in specific details from credible sources. You're moving from just telling a story to actually proving it, building toward that moment where it all clicks for your audience, that big aha moment.
So first, you need to establish why change was even needed. According to research from The Geopolitics of Salt, that French tax, the gabelle, created these insane price differences depending on where you lived. We're talking salt in Paris costing maybe 30 times more than it did in a place like Brittany, which was exempt. As you can imagine, this led to huge smuggling rings and just a deep, simmering resentment. It really shows you how fragile salt's power actually was.
Okay, next up, you introduce the thing that actually causes the change. A study called 19th Century Development of Refrigeration explains that mechanical refrigeration wasn't just a slightly better way of doing things, like shipping meat with blocks of ice. No, it was a complete game changer. It gave people, for the first time, precise, reliable control over preservation. It was a way to conquer decay, to conquer the seasons, to conquer distance, in a way that salt, for all its power, just never could.
And this is how you lock it in. You hit them with a direct quote from a totally different, credible source that connects the dots for them. This one, from a scientific journal, explicitly links the two. It basically says, yep, the worldwide drop in salt use, that was probably because refrigeration was introduced. And right there, that's your aha moment. It confirms everything. It wasn't just a coincidence. One thing directly caused the other.
All right, part 4, the art of reflection. Because you know, the best stories aren't just about the past, right? They connect to us here, now. This is where you build that bridge from your historical story straight into your audience's daily life.
And you start with something super simple but really powerful. An observation like this one.
Suddenly, this big abstract history of salt taxes and refrigerated rail cars isn't history anymore. It's right there in their kitchen. It makes the whole story feel immediate and really, really personal.
And from there, you can pull in details from another source, like this one, to just hammer home how deeply this revolution changed everything about how we eat. This technology, it completely disconnected us from the seasons and from geography, limits that had defined human life for, well, forever.
And you can end this section with a good thought-provoking question. This isn't just a clever trick. It's literally an invitation for your audience. You're encouraging them to take this new way of thinking and start looking for these hidden revolutions in their own lives.
And finally, we get to the last part, the powerful final frame. Look, your goal here isn't just to stop talking, it's to make your story stick. You want to leave your audience with one last powerful thought that's going to stay with them. A really good outro has a pretty simple, repeatable structure. You give them one last piece of wisdom, you say your channel's name to reinforce your brand, you give them a specific call to action, and you sign off. It gives them closure, but also encourages them to stick around for more.
So you start by modeling the technique yourself. You deliver your own powerful, lingering thought, something that's inspiring and kind of sums up the whole theme of your piece. For this one, it's all about the power of who gets to tell the story.
And that's really it. That's how you build a compelling narrative. The story of Salt and Cold is a perfect example. It shows us that history isn't just a bunch of random events, it's all interconnected. And learning how to find those connections and how to tell those stories, well, that's a seriously powerful skill. Thanks so much for watching The Explainer.